It's 1 a.m. and a drill is announced inside the Eric M. Taylor Center in the Rikers Island jail.
Just like that, 2,000 inmates are locked down in their cells. Guards rush to their emergency posts, and you know what that means? The jail lobby is completely empty. Now here's the weird part. The lobby isn't any ordinary lobby. Right next to a vending machine hanging up on the wall is an authentic Salvador Dalí painting. This real Dalí, worth $1 million, is hanging up in one of America's most notorious jails. While the drill has everyone distracted, two guards, Benny Nuzzo and Timothy Pina, slip into the completely empty lobby. These guys have been planning this moment for weeks. But they're not alone in this scheme. The whole operation is actually a four-man job. Mitchell Hockhauser, another guard, is overseeing the drill, while a fourth guard, Gregory Sokol, is standing watch near the lobby. Now, Benny and Timothy quickly get to work, unlocking the case that holds the painting. As one of the guards is slipping it into a bag, the other pulls out a copy of the original. They staple gun the pathetic replica to the wall, exchanging nervous glances, but also probably thinking about what they'll do with their cut of the money. Pay off their debts, maybe quit their hard, underpaid jobs. They could finally have actual money instead of barely getting by in New York City. The whole thing takes maybe about 4 minutes before they split up and go back to their posts, trying to act as normal as possible. Here's the thing though, they have no idea that their perfect plan is about to fall apart completely. But wait, how did $1 million Dalí masterpiece end up hanging in a jail lobby in the first place? And what mistake will turn these three guards from wannabe art thieves into inmates at the very same jail they worked at? Well, to start this story, we gotta go back to 1965. The commissioners at Rikers Island are pulling every string they can to convince Salvador Dalí, one of the most famous artists alive, to teach an art class to inmates.
Now you might think that's a long shot, but here's the thing about Dalí. The man was absolutely obsessed with publicity. When the word reached him that New York newspapers would plaster his prison visit across their front pages, he was more than happy to come over. But then, the day of, Dalí woke up with a 101-degree fever.
Obviously ill, he couldn't go through with the whole publicity stunt, and so he quickly slaps together a painting of Christ on the cross as an apology in his hotel room, ships it to the jail, and calls it a day. Since Dalí's whole visit was supposed to be this inspirational moment for the prisoners, the painting was first hung in the jail dining area, but after a coffee cup got thrown at it, it was moved to the lobby and forgotten. The warden added a little plaque below the painting with a couple sentences about it and its appraised value, which was $1 million. What could go wrong? Alright, so it's 1 a.m. and Mitchell announces a drill. This was phase 1 of the plan. In a drill, inmates are locked down and guards go to their predefined positions. This gave Benny and Timothy a crucial window to get into the lobby and get the painting. Gregory, meanwhile, takes up his position in the hallway, pretending to be on duty, but in reality acting as a lookout to make sure no one's coming. Now, the painting was put up in a fancy mahogany frame and enclosed in a glass case with 2 locks. Fortunately, being a staff at the jail, Benny was able to get keys, and after fumbling with the lock for a minute, he was able to open the case. They carefully slip the painting out, and they're moving fast, through the hallway, out the door, across the parking lot, and into Benny's car. But they couldn't just leave a big empty space on the wall. This is where their own masterpiece came in. Okay, I'm gonna be honest, the painting didn't look all that spectacular to begin with, but the replica was basically like just a bunch of scribbles that a kindergartner could have drawn. So Timothy quickly stapled the replica onto the wall in place of where the original painting was. Benny would drive the real painting back to his house once his shift ended. They all went back to their posts, hoping that no one would notice the fake for a while. A jail guard who goes up to the painting every day to pray notices something. The painting is a lot smaller than what he remembered, and instead of the fancy wooden frame around it, there's a brown painted border around the canvas. As soon as he looked at it, he immediately could tell it was a fake because of how bad it was. The investigators quickly determined that it was an inside job because A, inmates don't have access to the lobby, and B, a security camera that was pointed directly at the painting conveniently stopped working. Now they just had to figure out who it was. The Dalí case landed on the desk of then Inspector General Mike Caruso, and well, This is a first. Art heists happen, sure, but they don't usually take place in jails. Even though the amateur thieves were able to disable the security camera, Caruso wasn't giving up that easily. Rikers Island is covered with security cameras. So after spending a few hours reviewing footage, he found a couple of seconds of a car leaving the island after the usual night shift ended. His team also zeroed in on the fire drill itself. Drills had a set out procedure. They were documented, people were warned ahead of time, stuff like that. So a random unannounced drill in the middle of the night, it couldn't be more suspicious. Meanwhile, Timothy was at home after his shift and he was absolutely falling apart. This guy had put 16 years in Rikers, almost 2 decades of showing up every day, doing his job, and he was throwing it all away. He actually got so low that he contemplated suicide, but then he stopped himself. He didn't want the heist on his conscience any longer. He would go right up to investigators and come clean. And so, the next day he marched into Caruso's office. It all started about 4 months ago, he explained. Benny and Mitchell approached him with a plan. Now, Timothy was crucial to their scheme because he manned the front desk in the lobby, and so he could make sure they could get in and out without being noticed. The plan they pitched was simple. Get in during a distraction, swap the painting with a fake, and walk out with the real Dalí. Timothy was still hesitant, but Benny wasn't just a coworker, he was his boss, and so the pressure eventually got to him. Now you might be wondering, wasn't there a 4th member? And yes, we are forgetting about our good friend Greg. So it turned out their crew wasn't complete with just 3 people. They needed a 4th set of eyes to keep lookout. Timothy recruited Gregory, who was one of his carpool buddies, to do that job. After the whole story spilled out, Timothy just wanted to go home, but investigators weren't done with him. They decided to use him to try and get Gregory to confess. Timothy would wear a wire. Later that day, Timothy sat across Gregory at a coffee shop table. They went on talking for hours, both agreeing that they wished they had never been involved in the scheme. And as longtime carpool buddies, they agreed not to snitch on each other. But little did Gregory know that every word that was being spoken was being recorded and fed to investigators that were waiting for him outside. So as soon as he left the coffee shop, they surrounded him, and he folded instantly. Gregory showed up for his next shift, and his mission was clear. Get Benny and Mitchell on tape talking about the heist. The 3 had agreed to meet in a small basement next to a boiler. Now this would complicate things because the boiler was really loud and so the recording was of lower quality. When Gregory walked in, Benny was already paranoid. He was suspicious of Gregory and so he made him strip down to show that he wasn't wearing a wire. Now at this point, Gregory's heart probably dropped to his stomach because if Benny found the recorder, the whole operation could be blown. But luckily he didn't and they went on talking. Gregory then went on to talk about he was nervous that Timothy had flipped. He then learned that apparently in fear that they would get busted, Benny said that he had destroyed the painting and hid it in the ceiling of his mother's house. So the entire heist was done for nothing. Now, even with the low quality recording, investigators were still able to get search warrants for Benny's mother's home. Investigators combed through the home, but they couldn't find anything. They checked every closet, crawl space, and yes, the ceiling, but they found absolutely nothing. Caruso brought Benny in for questioning and expected him to crumble like the others did. But Benny wasn't Gregory or Timothy. He sat there completely unfazed by the pressure. Now, the investigators' patience finally ran out, and so it was time to unseal the indictments. Gregory and Timothy, who had already confessed and cooperated, immediately pleaded guilty. Mitchell, seeing the writing on the wall, followed suit, but Benny, however, pled not guilty. Now, you might think that's stupid. They had Gregory to testify and they had that recording. But Benny insisted that he was innocent and he was going to fight the case. When the evidence is stacked against you, you gotta bring out the big guns. And for Benny, that was celebrity lawyer Joe Tacopina. He had famous clients. You might know some of them like A$AP Rocky, Donald Trump, and Meek Mill. This wasn't some public defender. This was a guy that could do all the legal wizardry he could to find you not guilty. And Joe's strategy was actually pretty brilliant. First, he went after the painting's valuation. See, in theft cases, the value of what's stolen directly affects how much time you can get. So by questioning whether the Dalí was really worth $1 million, he was potentially shaving years off any sentence. The next thing Joe did was attack Gregory's testimony, arguing that he had an incentive to tell prosecutors what they wanted to hear, which, yeah, he probably did. Then there was the recording, which was a crucial piece of evidence. Joe pointed out that the noise in the recording made it hard to make out whether it was actually Benny talking. When the jury went back to deliberate, things still looked pretty bad for Benny. He braced himself for the possibility of being placed in handcuffs and led away to prison for a long time. To make matters even worse, the jury came back 4 hours later, and usually a quick turnaround for a jury is not a good sign. But then he heard not guilty. He was stunned. Even Joe was surprised. The lawyer had created enough doubt in the jury to find him not guilty. So while Gregory, Timothy, and Mitchell all got convicted, Benny walked out a free man. In the Dalí painting, it was never found. Now, did Benny do it? Well, he still insists to this day that he did not, but others think otherwise. But if you want to hear about another group of guys that did a string of heists stealing Bitcoin miners, then you should definitely click on the video on your screen right now. I will see you there. Goodbye.